After those testimonials, Isabelle, and all that energy, we are now going to welcome a man of conviction, a hero, an exceptional man, an outstanding man, someone who is also working for the planet. Yes, Jérôme, SWEN is very honored to be welcoming Jean-Louis Etienne today on the stage. Why Jean-Louis Etienne? Because we are in a conference about finance and responsible finance. Why Jean-Louis Etienne? Well, because we wanted to talk to a scientist, someone who has studied the degradation of the ecosystems for the past 50 years. And we also wanted to give a message of hope, because Jean-Louis Etienne is an explorer. With him, we've had the possibility to dream, and he has strong messages to share. Never be tempted to give up. Be efficient on your sphere of influence. So we're going to welcome him, but just before we talk to him, let's watch this video. Explorer. Doctor. A defender of the planet. His next challenge. Polar Pod. Jean-Louis Etienne.
Bonsoir Jean-Louis.
So, good evening, Jean-Louis. How are you? Well, we are doing fine. And when we see this video, which is quite impressive, and welcoming you here today, as Isabelle was just telling me, it really is an honor. Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for being with us on the stage. I know it wasn't easy to find a set. Maybe it's easier to walk through the pool, but you did find the studio, and thank you very much for that. So before we have our discussion, and before we talk with our jury members who are here today, I would like to give you the floor. I know you would like to share some images, some messages based on your own experience. Well, yeah, let's work with our ecosystem again, because nature really is the best example of circular economy. Let's renew, let's bind with the ecosystem Earth again. You know, this ecosystem is like a triad. We have primary production, consumers, and recyclers. Primary production in nature is what is green. Everything that is green, no, that is what is indispensable for any life on Earth. This is what plants do. They grow, they develop, because they have their feet, their roots in the water, in the ground. They capture CO2 with the sun. They produce glucose, this feeds them, and they release oxygen. As you can see, they play a fundamental role, and this is the starting point that is indispensable for all life on Earth. And you also have those plants in the ocean. It's not only on Earth, on the ground, if you will. And what those plants do is capture CO2, feed themselves, and release oxygen. And then you have the consumers. Those consumers can be either vegetarians or carnivores. And in nature, you also have something that is extraordinary, and those are the recyclers. Recyclers, if you will, well, we know them, worms, jackals, hyenas, but there are other recyclers that we are not necessarily aware of, microbes, bacteria, all those microorganisms. And recyclers play an indispensable role, because you have the primary production, consumers, and recyclers. And recyclers, what they do is eat up the organic matter of the consumers and produce fertilizer, produce earth that is going to feed nature again. And it works well, because obviously we have the Darwinian evolution, but it is very slow. But with this system, we have a stability of needs and a stability of resources or means. And this was working very fine until the arrival of Superman. Well, Superman and Superwoman, obviously. Well, when you have Superman on the screen, well, yes, sorry, but what I meant here is humankind, obviously. We are gifted mutants. We are genius mutants. Now, let's think about everything that we are able to invent if you compare ourselves with dogs, cats, and other animals. And within a short period of time, we were able to take control over other species, over the world. We are able to develop, and we are so powerful that other species are not able to fight back. We are able to mobilize. We are seeing it with the virus. We are being quite fast indeed. Other species cannot react that fast. You've never seen a migratory bird using a GPS, have you? And nature cannot face the impact that we're imposing on it. So we had this great circular economy, and now, because of our action, we've transformed it into an elliptical economy. Because we need to consume, we need to feed more people. You have to have a growing population, and you have marketing teams who are doing a great job, and you want to consume more and more. And so with this new economy, we are moving away from the natural ecosystem. So let's go back to this natural ecosystem. Let's have a look at the 3 pillars that I mentioned, and let's see how we can act. If we talk about primary production, everything that we can do today in order to protect grasslands and forests is something that goes in the right direction. Same thing for the ocean. We always have the impression, in the past, we used to think that we could simply release everything into the ocean. It would just go so far away that it would absorb everything. But now it has come to a saturation. You find everything in oceans, pesticides, organochlorides, etc. Let's be responsible. Let's be informed consumers. Let me give you a few examples. I like the idea of the house with external insulation. This is extremely efficient. You don't need to redecorate, and it's quite easy to do this with many homes. And for some years now, our government has decided to help us, financially support us. But we could also do this by ourselves with some friends. Not that complicated, I always invite people to do things upon their own initiative, because they're also going to save money in the end. It's also much more comfortable, and you don't feel sick, because if you're properly insulated, then you don't feel sick. So it's very positive. Also would like to talk about water. Water needs are going to increase. We're going to have more droughts. So if you have a house and a roof, go to a DIY shop and buy a collection equipment in order to collect rainwater. You need to save water. It is becoming a rare, a scarce resource. You can use it to water your garden, clean your car. There's also this other thing, eat organic food. Well, yes, as much as you can, please buy organic food, and also consume locally, go to a food market, public transport also, local food systems. And also on the left you have this picture of a man who's so happy, so many products. And on the right-hand side you have this car sharing system. I like this idea of a car sharing system. I'm from the south of France, but I spent lots of time in Paris. But I went from Albi to Toulouse, and I realized that at the entrance of the highway, you had parking lots for car sharing purpose. And this is good because it allows people to meet other people, and sometimes people will marry eventually. Well, that's what I was told. But I must say, this is not what we are very good at. No. Let's be informed consumers. That's something we can do. But what about recycling? Well, no, we're not good at recycling. We simply accumulate stuff. And this is what nature does. No, nature really makes sure that everything is being used up and recycled. And this is something that we are not good at. And recycling is not just about sorting waste. I took part in a conference at an engineering school the other day, and I told those students, we have to recycle more and more. This is the future of the industry. We need to be able to recycle everything in order to return the materials to the economy. No, recycling is not just about sorting waste. No, recycling is something that you need to do upstream. You need to think what you're going to produce even before you produce it. And there's one thing we cannot do is recycling CO2. CO2 is responsible for global warming. We don't have any CO2 vacuum cleaner, unfortunately. And the Earth has seen its temperature increase by 1 degree over a century. And this is not something that we really perceive. Global warming is not something that people really feel. You can't really perceive this 1 degree temperature increase over a century. No, this is the doctor talking now. It's a bit like the human body. Plus 1 degree. 38 degrees, you see how you feel. 39 degrees, it's like having a fever. And this is just the beginning of more complications and diseases. And nature knows how to recycle CO2. Only nature knows how to do this through photosynthesis. So what do we need to do? We need to reforest, we need to stop deforestation, and we need to do everything we can so that nature can recapture CO2. And we also need to store electricity. We all know this. There's also one thing I'd like to mention. Renewable energy. It's thermal solar energy. We talk about photovoltaic solar energy, but let's talk about thermal solar energy. When you water your garden, the water is quite warm. It's because of the black bodies. They capture the heat from the solar rays. No, tomorrow, if you park your car and it's sunny, you will see when you touch the hood, for example, that it's quite warm. And we could do the same thing and produce hot water using such a system. Unfortunately, this is not really widely used in our country. In the future, I also think that we should use wood as a building material. People are using it more and more. You even have tall buildings made up of wood. The good thing about wood, just checking the clock, am I good? Yes, you're fine. Go ahead, Jean-Louis, go ahead. Don't worry. There will be a few questions, but we're fine with time. Don't worry. I very much like this picture because I wanted to be a carpenter myself. I was very much interested in using wood, and now people are using wood again. If you go to a DIY store and if you buy a wooden plank, well, I don't often go there, I must say, but no, for those who are listening to us, maybe someone would like to go to DIY stores and buy a wooden plank that weighs 1 kilo, for example. You buy 500 grams of carbon. If you see what I mean, this is what nature is able to store. And this is something that trees do. It's a miracle. They are indispensable. They have their roots in the water. This keeps the water at the right level, and the branches of the tree has some leaves also, and this is also where biodiversity can thrive. And I talked about agroforestry early on, having trees in fields, spaced enough so that a combine harvester can go between the trees. This is our future because trees maintain the water levels, the hygrometry, and it also allows to fight pests that we are currently fighting using all sorts of chemicals. And I believe that wooden buildings are our future, and trees, in my view, is the best way to reconcile nature and agriculture. Early on, Adrien talked about the fact that you shouldn't want to do things too hastily or rapidly. People say, let's do this, let's do that, let's go to court. No. we are talking about a long-term process. Global warming is due to excess consumption of fossil fuel. But we will not be able to completely do away with fossil fuels. We have to learn how to give up coal, because coal is our enemy. Gas is much better because it emits twice less CO2. And this energy transition is really the equation of the century. It is an equation. It is quite complex, and it will be a long-term process. But we can succeed if everyone is able to act in their own sphere of influence. This is how we're going to succeed. So don't forget about this ecosystem that we already have, and try to rethink the way you do things based on that scheme. Well, thank you, Jean-Louis. Together with Jérôme and SWEN, I must say that we very much like what you say. You talk about this sphere of influence, and this rings a bell. This is exactly what we're trying to do. It's not about having a small sphere of influence. You really have to go for it, regardless of the size of your sphere of influence. Whether it's at a personal level, private level, or professional level, you have to be as efficient as you can. Well, indeed, this is a strong message, and we believe in it, and it also is highly motivating. And I have many questions for you, Jean-Louis, but I will only ask one, because I think that other people would like to ask a few questions afterwards. This is quite impressive, isn't it? We saw all those pictures, your explorations, your expeditions. I think you've been to so many places worldwide, and you're going to launch a new expedition, Polo Pod. And you said I could mention how old you are, so I will do so. How do you do this? You're 74 years old, and you have so much energy. How can you keep that motivation? How do you do this? Well, I must say that my personal path is not a usual one. I started out as a metal worker, and I'm now realizing that I had all sorts of difficulties in school. No problem with spelling and etc. And I wasn't a good pupil. I wasn't doing well at school. Yes, apparently you are a DIY person, can't see your finger. So I didn't go to middle school. I went to vocational school. There wasn't any spot in carpentry, so I did metal work. And this job training, this occupational training really interested me, and it made me want to study again, and I got my degree and was very much interested in life sciences, so I studied medicine. After that, I discovered that I actually loved orthopedics. Because in orthopedics, you use plates and screws, just like a carpenter, you see. But there was something else to it. I really wanted to explore the world. I grew up in a small village, and I had fields surroundings, and nature was really a place where I could find refuge. And I would go and see the birds. I just loved this. I really wanted to explore the world. I was a resident in surgery, and I really wanted to go and explore the world. And I thought, well, maybe now's the time to do so. And I started with Père Javel, with Father Javel. We crossed the Atlantic with young people who were drug addicts, and I went with Tabali. I went to the Himalaya as a doctor. And when I turned 40, I decided to do my own expedition. And I went to the North Pole. I would say that North Pole was something that I could do. It's not difficult. All you have to do is pull a sled. You don't need any specific technique. It's quite easy to pull a sled, isn't it? But I was already a very good camper. I was good at camping. So I learned how to not give up. This is indispensable. This is how you build your own future. If you don't pursue your dream, you only end up being frustrated. You really have to persevere, you have to go for it, and you have to not give up. And also, Jean-Louis, if I may, you talked about that night that you spent in the tent, minus 50 degrees. That's quite exceptional, isn't it? Minus 50 degrees. Yes, I must say that was really, really cold. And I mean, it was really like minus 50 degrees. I was by myself, and I was feeling, hypothermia coming. So in order to stay awake, I would do mental math in order to make sure that I was still active. And obviously, you have to know how to multiply numbers, not to do this. But this has helped me many, many times. And this has helped me not give up. It was quite ambitious, that project, going to the North Pole by myself. And I suddenly realized once I was there, when you start something, when you want to do something and you know this is probably too difficult for you, you should still go for it because you don't know where your limits are. You only find those limits once you are on the ground. You realize that you're able to fight, to resist. And when I reached the North Pole, I realized that this would be my life as of that day. I decided to continue and go to the North Pole more and more often. And I became an entrepreneur because organizing expeditions is really a form of entrepreneurship. There is an adventure, a scientific community has some expectations also, and there's something that you need to build in order to go there. So I like everything about this. Obviously, I won't go to the North Pole pulling my own sled. I'm more like an entrepreneur. I work together with partners, with legal experts for the contracts. I hire the right people to go on that exhibition. It really, really is fascinating. So pursue your dreams, even if it's complicated. Well, as for the Polo Pod, I know you're raising funds right now. And for those who are watching you right now, listening to you, this might resonate and they will probably want to support you. So we have many questions. I want to ask you one of them, especially regarding young people. With this current crisis that is turning into a social crisis, if you were to say something to the younger generations, what would be that message? I would tell them you have to make sure that you build something yourself. You are your own capital. With your strength and your weak points, you will have to go through the barriers. You will have to overcome the hurdles and decisions. You're going to build your own personality. There were demonstrations against the reform of the retirement scheme. And I saw young people taking part in those demonstrations. I was thinking, my gosh, they haven't experienced anything yet and they're already resisting. This is because they are looking for the group to find a solution for them. Obviously, we need the group. You have public services, etc. But you need to you are your own actor. Now, close to where I live, there is a occupational school, and not too long ago, I was driving by, and there were two students coming out, and I was just listening to them. And one of them asked the other one, "What are you studying?" "Oh, I study bakery." And the one said, "Oh, great!" And this word "great" really meant that he really had found what he was going to do. This is what I'm referring to. I have my doubts also. Sometimes I think I'm not going to make it, but I know by experience that you have to stay strong and go for it. So if you have this idea, you really have to go for it. And if you go some of the way, well, then the life will do the rest of the way. You need to be attuned, you need to be aware. It's a bit like when you watch a good movie and you've been inspired by a hero, by one of the characters, and it gives you the energy to go back and fight for your dream.
Sortir les antennes, je vois que...
So, being attuned, as you said, as I can see, our jury members are really looking to ask questions. There are two questions. I'm going to give the floor to Carole Imbert from Arkea and Géraldine Hong from the OECD. Carole, you have the floor. Thank you, Jérôme. Well, you asked me to introduce myself first. I'm in charge of financial and ESG research at Arkea ES. So research also means explorating, and I believe that there's still to be explored in the ESG field. But my question to you is, how does one become Jean-Louis Etienne? So how does one become Jean-Louis Etienne? Well, I think I've said a lot already. I tried to really do the things that I really liked. Now, being bold is sometimes about giving up other things. For example, I was a resident, I went on an expedition, then I went back to university and I received a letter from Eric Tabali, although I was working with one of the great professors, and I received this letter. Eric Tabali was asking me to go with him on an expedition. And I asked him about this, and he said, well, if I would go for it. I said, well, yes, good. This is what I'm going to do. And you have to be an explorer in your trade. Don't try to be me. This is my life. I've always been quite autonomous. I've been repairing my own car until I was 35 years old. I always try to be self-standing, but do explore the trade that you've chosen. Try to enrich yourself at all times. I think this answers your question, Carole. I think we were all very much convinced by this already. Géraldine Hong from OECD. So please speak into the mic. Jean-Louis Etienne, good evening. It's a great honor to be talking to you today. You are really inspiring. I work on green finance at the OECD, and I'm very much interested in public policies that have to do with climate issues. Be honest with me. Do you think that public policies today are right in the face of the current challenges? Well, I would be tempted to say no. But I could say that actually it is complex. How are we going to, if you will, because we all want. Should I talk to you? Should I turn to the lady? As you wish. We have the cameras there. We'll deal with this. Well, 80% of the energy that is consumed worldwide is fossil energy. 80%. And I mentioned this early on. If we stopped using coal, and we see it is quite complicated, especially in countries such as China or India, this is where we need to intervene. We need to help those governments to at least move to gas. Because at least gas has lower carbon emissions. And then you have to move on to renewable energies. So we are going to move towards that energy mix anyhow. So if I'm not happy, I say no, the policies are not sufficient, but you work at the OECD and you know how complex things are. And as I said, I think everyone should try to be as efficient as possible. This is what is going to allow us to move forward. But global warming is a serious problem, and it could become even more serious. We are all seeing how the planet is being more and more impacted. So the Earth has warmed up by 1 degree over a century, but this is not necessarily something that people talk about. We don't necessarily realize at our own level that the temperature has increased by 1 degree, but we are already seeing some damage. So think about the body temperature. This will give you a good analogy. It's quite complex. Don't give up. And we need to convince the governments who are not doing enough to do more. Thank you, Géraldine. Thank you, Jean-Louis, for that answer. Well, Jean-Louis, unfortunately, we've reached the end of that interview. Thank you very much for all those words. Thank you for that energy, for the hope. No, never give up. move forward, go forward and defend what you believe in. When we'll try and do this. Well, thank you very much.
Les coulisses.
Thank you, Mr. Etienne.